gosh, 10 years, that's flown by, hasn't it?
Hasn't it? We all probably remember,
Yeah.
what was back in the day.
Where were you
when it happened? Just the tragic loss of life of probably one of our, as you said in your intro, probably one of the most iconic performers, British performers of all time. And lots of tributes being paid online to her this morning. She died when she was 27 years old. I mean, she'd barely got started. What I think is really interesting is she obviously released her first album, Frank, in 2003. She then released Back to Black, which is the kind of big, iconic album that we all remember, that really heartfelt, very sad, but incredibly beautiful album. In 2007, and then off the back of the success of Back to Black, Frank, which was her first album that kind of wasn't received brilliantly. She was a pretty obscure jazz artist from North London. Then, really saw her kind of being catapulted to the levels of fame that she had before she died. And like I said, lots of people online sharing their favourite songs, their favourite performances. She also had that really iconic look, didn't she? I mean,
the beehive,
the eyeliner, the polka dots, the flat pumps. I mean, she really was an icon in terms of music, but also just in terms of image, and really kind of embodied kind of pop culture in the late 2000s, I think it's fair to say. She was kind of the front page of Heat magazine, wasn't she? She was kind of gossip column fodder as much as she was a performer. So really an icon of our age, I think.
What I'm really surprised by is that there hasn't been a movie made of her life yet, because I recently watched Judy Garland, was it called Judy, the film with Renée Zellweger, and I also love La Vie en Rose about Edith Piaf. And they have such similar stories, don't they? That they have this raw talent that they're projected and catapulted into the spotlight, and then they have this sort of substance abuse that's ultimately their undoing. And it was also her relationship, of course, with Pete Doherty that we all watched play out in front of the world's cameras that was so damaging.
Yeah, and also the relationship with her father, who's gone on, there's lots of controversies, isn't there, around kind of, the men in her life, effectively, and this idea, like you say, and we've seen it with other female performers, Britney Spears, completely different kind of music, perhaps, but similarly, very young women who are catapulted to levels of fame and stardom that I cannot even fathom, and must have an incredible impact on you as a young woman. And then, ultimately, I mean, dare we say, kind of, let down by some of the, abusive relationships with men in her life that led her into, really serious drug addiction problems. And ultimately, she died of alcohol poisoning alone in bed. And that's, at the age of 27, to have all that promise, all that talent, it's kind of tragic beyond words, isn't it?
I'm struck by the fact she was just now, she's died at 27, which is not far from my age, and it just strikes me how young she was. And I just wonder if we've got better or worse at how we sort of deal with celebrities and how we treat them when they are clearly suffering from whether it's addiction or mental health crises. Because Isabel was telling me, we were chatting in the break, and you'd gone to see her one of her concerts at one point. And you said she really wasn't well, and they were actually sort of forcing her, dragging her on.
They were just trying to help her stand up, and she was taking a guitar off one of her band members and playing it, and you could see everyone wincing, and you just thought, why is this being allowed to happen? And the crowd was almost singing the songs for her because she could barely speak, and she clearly was ill. And you just wonder why there wasn't the care there at that stage.
Yeah, well, I remember something of Whitney Houston towards the end of her life. She also suffered huge, huge drug addiction problems as well, and a similar thing. Kind of being put out to perform these huge, vast concerts, very clearly under the influence and not very well. But, these women, I dare say it does seem to normally be women, become industries in themselves. We see it with Britney Spears, Demi Lovato, Amy Winehouse, Marilyn Monroe. I mean, the list goes on of these iconic women who, capture the imaginations and hearts of so many millions of people, and then end up, falling into these really abusive cycles when it comes to drug addiction. And that is a huge lesson when you look at Amy Winehouse's life. She had all the talent, all the promise, all the love, from all of us, but sadly died so young. People call it the 27 Club because also Jimi Hendrix and Kurt Cobain, also incredible musicians who also died at that age.
Gosh, it's so sad, isn't it? But do you know what I'm going to do? I've got a really long drive later on today, and I'm going to put on her CDs in tribute to her CDs. I'm so old school, but listen.
What's your favourite song?
Back to Black, I think I love, I could probably sing every single word if it started playing now. I can't think of them now, but, it's that iconic. It's, ingrained in our minds. What's your favourite song?
I like Valerie.
Oh, of course,
because it's a little bit uplifting. What about you?
I mean, Rehab was a really... I know all the ones we're saying were huge hits, and it's almost cliche to say, yeah, but I like that. But there's a reason they were so... and, of course, retrospectively, Rehab is quite poignant, isn't it? The notes and
my
songs.
daddy made me go to Rehab.
Yeah, exactly.
And I said, no.